fellow innovators. This is Patrick Emmons.
And this is Shelli Nelson.
Welcome to the Innovation and the Digital Enterprise podcast, where we interview successful visionaries and leaders and give you insight into how they drive and support innovation within their organizations.
Today, we're delighted to introduce Adan Pope, Senior Vice President of Engineering, Applications, and AI at TAG, the Aspen Group, a role he assumed in October 2024 after more than 36 years of experience across engineering and technology leadership in diverse sectors, including public safety, telecommunications, and digital transformation. Previously, Adan served as CTO at Intrado Life and Safety, where he led over 500 engineering, product, security, and operations professionals, overseeing a portfolio of more than 120 products. An innovator and author, Adan co-founded Taraxa Labs and chairs the advisory board at Waylay. He's also written Respect the Weeds, Digital Transformation Rooted in Principled Leadership, Vision, and Innovation. Adan holds a BS, MS in Computer Science and an MBA, and is a frequent speaker on principled technology leadership and digital transformation journeys.
Welcome to the show, Adan.
Hey, thank you so much. It's great to be here with you all.
Adan, your career spans decades of transformation in tech in the last 20 years.
I feel that.
Right.
I feel that.
but you're doing your push-ups, as we talked about.
I am, every day,
right?
exactly. 75.
Right?
I'm
It's
at 75
amazing.
every day. Do those push-ups.
How many?
75 a day so far.
Impressive.
I'm working toward 100. Yeah.
I'm not getting in a fight with you. So, well, like I said, your career span, some pretty impressive. Like you think about just the last 20 years, how much has changed. You know, it's odd to think that the iPhone is still not even 20 years old, right?
Crazy.
We're like 15, 16 years old, and how much of an impact that's had on everybody. And you've been a developer, an executive, you've been an author twice now. When you look back on that, what defines your journey, your leadership journey, like from where it began to where you are now?
You know, I look back at my first job actually as the most influential job I ever took. That was at AT&T Bell Labs in Naperville. When I graduated with my undergrad in electrical engineering. I was a hardware guy at undergrad, and I ended up in this great group of leaders and developers at Bell Labs that just were excellent, and they were just beyond my understanding of how great they were. And the computer science skills that they had. I was an electrical engineer. This was a computer science job. And so within 6 months, I realized I better go get a master's degree in computer science to be able to hang with these folks. Because, you know, they were super, super good. I was solving, defects and, doing MRs like we all do in our first jobs. But just the culture of excellence, the culture of egalitarian nature of the business where you're valued based on what you do, not who you are, where you come from, really sticks with me even today. I thought about it. I had a couple job opportunities. One was Bell Labs and one was Cray Research. And I went to Bell Labs because they invented the transistor and the modern computer and almost every other thing that we look at today as a basis of technology. And things have moved on amazingly since then. But from there, I went to Tel Labs, an Illinois startup, worked with Mike Burke when the stock was $7 and I left at 93. So I'm pretty proud of that.
Well played.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm really happy about that. Mike was still the founder, and what a great guy. Would like see you in Ogden Avenue having a hot dog and come and pay your bill, that kind of guy. And we really, really grew the business. And from there, I moved into a number of other positions, but more into the executive and leadership side, and got an MBA from North Central. And that was a defense move. That was like, I'm going to have to be in the room with a bunch of executives, and I don't understand what we're talking about.
Smart.
And so I went and got an MBA, midnight school. I tell people, don't make me use my MBA.
As a guy without an MBA, I think I can tell you, nobody wants you to deploy the MBA.
I have one, but don't make me use it, because what I really love to do is to innovate, and I really love to solve the problem, but you can't do that unless a problem turns into a business opportunity and it turns into an investment thesis. And so that really shaped a lot of my thinking. And then, over the years, I've had the great opportunity of being CTO for, 25 years of my career, and CIO. And Intrado was an amazing experience. That was public safety. And, that's about half the country's 911 network. And I was really, really proud to lead that very consequential job. So yeah, now here I am at TAG, the Aspen Group, and I lead the engineering and applications group there. And it's been really interesting and unique to move from public safety to healthcare, from sort of business to citizenry to business to consumer. There's a lot of differences there. But anyway, it's been a great journey so far, and we've really made strides on the platforms that we have, and it's been a great place.
That's incredible.
What I'm hearing is quality, right? Really focus on setting a standard.
Yeah.
Constantly educating, constantly growing, constantly elevating yourself, and humility with the opportunities that you're given, and appreciating the fact that you get to work with great people.
I really do. I think humility is one of those things that I hope you either have it or, or you can learn it, but it's super important, it's super important. Everything I've ever learned, I learned, I wasn't born with this knowledge, and I worked with folks, as I said, across these companies that have really taught me a lot. When I went to Entrado, I asked the head of engineering that was there, ultimately ended up reporting to me, like, what happens when you dial 911? Took me 9 months to figure it out completely. Like, okay, in this circumstance that happens, and in this one, the other one. But just by asking the question and not assuming, boy, did we really turn that business around. And that business got sold from one private equity owner to another private equity owner. So it was a really great exit for the PE firms as well. And we made it better. So yeah, humility is an important thing because I'm always learning. I'm interested in learning. In fact, this fall, Wednesday, I started teaching my first class at IIT on disaster recovery and planning.
Very cool.
And I think I'm probably going to learn as much from the students as they're going to learn from me.
That's awesome.
So,
That's awesome.
Good luck. I love that
Thank
school.
You. Me too.
Really, I think it's a gem. That UIC, I think we talked about this. Just two amazing universities that I think really don't get the publicity they deserve.
Yeah. I love the fact there's a train going through the campus, like right through the building. It's awesome.
And they have a lacrosse team now.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah,
all right.
That's important to one of us.
Yeah.
Adan, just curious what inspired you to write Respect the Weeds, and I guess how does that relate to your current role at TAG?
Yeah, Respect the Weeds. So I've traveled a lot in my life, and my way of processing experiences is to write about them. Because I want to reflect and try to learn again from, oh my gosh, this happened and that happened. And what happened? What did it mean? I'm trying to search for the meaning. And so I wrote these essays, a lot of them. And Peter had done the same thing, my co-author. And I got to this point where I had this large collection of essays, and Peter and I had done a lot of public speaking together in these jobs, as he was sort of my speech writer and the guy whispering in my ear about the storylines and so forth that we would speak about. And I called him up one night and I said, man, I would like to write a book. Would you write a book with me? And the answer, thankfully, was yeah. But then about what? And about the learnings from leadership from a really tangible point of view. And the weed, not the funny weed, but a weed like the one in your garden.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't know what we're talking about there,
but I don't know what
I admire weeds because they thrive in the most inhospitable environments. And in fact, over my life, I'd take pictures of weeds and text them to my friends, like, look at this badass weed, like this thing's amazing. Like this thing is growing out of the side of a building. Like, good grief, how's it doing that, So I really respect that as an analogy of us as leaders and as people. And I consider myself kind of a weed. I came from nowhere, Ohio, and a not very good school, and went to a tech college, and I ended up working at Bell Labs with amazing people and ultimately growing this career and getting all this other secondary and tertiary education. So that was the inspiration of sort of processing the experiences. And the big experience that I have had, at least in that book at the time, was how to turn an idea into something that's investable in a product. Because we have a lot of ideas. How many guys just come and say, I got a great idea, Pat. Like, Patrick, what should we do? You're the CEO. You're like, get out of my office. Like, how are we going to make money at this?
Right.
Like, sometimes you might be, I agree. But most of the time, the CEOs I'd work with would be like, really? Come back when you think you can make some money at it. So we established this process about how to turn ideas into innovations, into businesses. And with that process, I've launched a dozen products over these companies. And, to earn great returns for the businesses. And some of them, maybe were more or less successful. Most of them were quite successful. But it comes down to, just as I said, being humble, approaching this from a learning perspective, having empathy with your customers or with your constituents, and then developing a methodology to turn ideas into products that can earn money for your stakeholders. Because again, they're not going to invest unless they can see a return. My MBA is still in the back of my head. So how do we do that? I took a stint in product management too for a while when I was at Tel Labs because I wanted to be on the other side of it. That was not my jam. It was not something I really wanted to do after a while, but it does definitely inform, like what are the expected returns and what's the competitive marketplace look like. So that was the basis of that book, was leadership being the analogy of a weed, being able to take resources from wherever they are, thrive in an hospitable environment, and then lead with a principled manner. And so that's that book in a nutshell, with the methodology on innovation, which works. I mean, I've used it dozens of times and it works.
That's awesome. And then the new book, you highlight themes like velocity versus stability and scale versus craft. Which of those is most alive in your work right now?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think that Intentional Tensions is a book that's really born out of a lot of lessons on transformation. And many of those came through sales. So like, you sell your company to another company and now you find yourself inside of another company, and how do you perform? Because your company was only bought because of its revenue, EBITDA, strategic objective. Some thesis was there that caused the acquisition to be attractive enough for, the investors to part with their money. And in my experience, many companies struggle once they're purchased. And the purchasing company has a hard time getting the value they thought they would get. And I think there's some lessons to that. There's some lessons in that the company that you bought, if I use our analogy in the book, is sort of like a tennis racket. It's this designed system of intersecting tensions that, when wielded appropriately by the leadership, can return a disproportional return of energy. Like the tennis player can really hit the sweet spot in man. And then the big company buys the small company, and the big company is another system of tensions. Broader, bigger, larger, all the people that are there are just organizations or collections of people. So all those things are there too. And then you put this little company inside of the big company and you wonder why there's a loss of velocity, a loss of throughput, a loss of value in many cases. In my experience and our experience, it's because we didn't really respect what we bought as a unique system of tension. And so there's this balance between, do we fully integrate it? Do we leave it alone? How do we integrate it in a manner that actually multiplies its value? And how do we create incentives that align that way? And that's another thing in the book. So you ask a question like velocity versus stability. I think that we need stable velocity.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
We need that. And we start off with a very astable system when we acquire something. And for TAG as well, I think, we focused a lot on that theme. Like, how do we get our systems to a point where they're available, highly available, reliable, and we can deliver capabilities rapidly into that platform or portfolio? And we did that. I think nothing's ever done, but we're kind of at the point now where we have a very stable operating environment, and we're delivering it at a nice velocity. And I've got metrics to prove it. Again, back to the business case and back to the making sure that you're providing return to your investors. So it's sort of stable velocity is what I would say. And I think the aspect of tensions, people also look at that many times. We were talking before about it's a negative thing. No, actually, it's a source of energy. It's a source of energy, but it can become negative, or it can be very positive.
It can wear people down if not balanced.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
I always think about it like a watch, right? A watch is a system of tensions, right?
It is. That's a great analogy.
How does it click? How does it keep working? You mentioned velocity, stability, quality. I'll put in there too from a software standpoint. And Dr. Forsgren does a great job in the book Accelerate, talking about how they're not actually enemies. They are compatriots, right? Like,
for sure.
Just because you're moving slow doesn't mean you're building a better product. And in some cases, because you're not speed testing it, because you're not focused on how do we get velocity up, you're actually creating, a jalopy that's just never going to be street ready.
Yeah.
You know,
I think velocity and throughput are kind of an interesting thing too. I like to talk about throughput in Agile more than velocity itself, because to your point, like I can do a lot of stuff fast, poorly. Okay.
I
I
think that was
mean,
my high school career right
yeah.
there, 100%. A lot
I
of
can
stuff
do a
done
lot of
quickly. Yeah, just
poorly.
poorly. All of it.
What I really want is I want to know how much we got done that was based on what we said we would do. And my preaching mantra at every company I've been at, including the current one, is we want to be an organization that says what we're going to do, that does what we say, and can prove it. That's basically, I think, the definition of a great engineering team or a technology team. And when we can't, we want to be transparent about it. Like, hey, this happened, that happened, this is a risk, not to throw your hands up or make an excuse, but to then, and we're going to do the following. I think the idea of having a unified plan, it sounds so rudimentary, is a key thing in leadership too, especially in kind of digital transformation technology areas. The first thing we'd always do, and I've done this now for, I don't know, dozens of years, so it seems, is create this VSEM. It's vision, strategy, execution, priorities, and metrics. Okay, that's the Cisco model. It's not mine. But you can put in one page, what's the vision statement?
Mm-hmm.
What is the strategy to achieve it? And then have that discussion first. And then what are the execution criteria, the things that we're going to go do, and what are the metrics that are going to go show that we've done them? And then I literally print it on a D-sized paper and hang it on the wall outside of my office. And I did that here. I've done that for every place I've been at for a very, very long time. And just that transparency changes the mindset of the people around you. I can see myself in that organization and that priority. And by the way, if you're depending upon me, I've been clear. You can disagree with my priorities right now because they're written on the wall.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately a good model too. Just have a plan, be transparent about it, and then live it.
Patrick Lencioni's got a book called The Advantage, where there's 7 critical questions that you have to answer as a leader. And a lot of it is exactly what you just said of like, why do we exist? Who do we serve? What makes us different? And I use that in my business, and we will quiz people on it.
Yeah.
One of the great parts of being in a fraternity is, for some reason, I still know that the Delta Upsilon fraternity was founded in 1838. I don't know why, other than I had to memorize this stuff to become a member. Why we don't do that in our businesses was the question I asked myself. Like, and last night it came up about core values, and I said, I said, he goes, somebody asked me, like, can you recite your core values? Oh, of course I can, right? But to your point on prove it, okay?
Yeah.
How do you prove that you're a value-driven organization? And my prove it is, what is the length of time it takes for a new hire to be able to repeat the core values, whether they live them or not? Just even know them is step one. So if it takes 3 months for a new hire to know it, now you've got proof we are a value-driven organization, right? And so I do think I'm with you on answering those questions, creating that clarity. That's another book, The 4 Obsessions of an Executive, right? Create a good leadership team, create clarity, reinforce clarity, hire, fire, and promote based upon the clarity that you provided.
For sure.
So that teams piece, and I want to go back to that, Adan. So how would you recommend building teams that are comfortable with tension rather than rushing to resolve the issues?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we have to be okay with discomfort, right? As a leader, at least, I have to be okay with the fact that there's tension in the room. I think that how do we create teams? We get that tension focused on the objectives of our plan and the business strategy and the things we're trying to do, not focused on the high school aspects of it. Like, I like you, I don't like you, you call me a name, whatever. I mean, just don't have no tolerance for that whatsoever. And that's a matter of HR normally. But if the tensions are really related to the objectives and we can really talk about those, then we can have a meaningful conversation of how to tune them. Like, my organization needs QA to be able to turn these epics out in this period of time with this quality. And oh, by the way, if the QA has a problem, the quality has a quality problem, I failed, right? Because the organization will measure the tech, not the QA, right? And so that's a tension. Are they sized appropriately? My goal is to help them be sized appropriately. My goal is to help them have automation that really works. My goal is to help them by giving them unit tests for everything I can possibly put into my sprint. So that's, I think, sort of how we create positive tension versus the negative. And it happens, unfortunately, it happens many places. You could take the negative of that and say, why isn't QA improving the quality of my product? Well, it's not my product and it's not them, it's us, because we're equally responsible. And I think that comes down to the metrics. Like, we don't want to measure how many story points I put on the board. We want to measure how often I deploy without a rollback, right? For example. And I think that's the way to do it. Unfortunately, humans are the most intractable of all creatures in the universe. And so the personalities do come into it as well. And sometimes people just don't like each other. And sometimes they like each other so much they don't want to challenge each other.
Totally.
And so I look for those things and I'm like, hey, let's look back at our strategy, our objectives. Are we really kind of aligned on those? And then all the personalities can hopefully set aside. And I coach people a lot about that. Like, leave that at the door, leave that at the door. And also, as I said, we were talking about friction versus tension before. I don't want friction on the personal level. I want friction and tension on the project and on the productivity level. The personal level, I have no tolerance for it. Because again, I just want to be an authentic person. I want people to I think people do their best work when they like working, for the place too. And if it's a hostile environment, that doesn't feel good, and that's not productive. But an environment with positive tensions, that's a great place to work. It makes you sharper. As I said, my Bell Labs story, I went to Bell Labs. I thought pretty highly of my degree. I had a high grade point average, and I was like, I'm pretty good. And they're like, no, son, you can't program in C. I'm like, oh my God, that was like, okay, let me go take care of that,
Didn't they create C though?
They did.
Yeah,
they did.
That's kind of big dogging you a little bit.
Yeah. Well, right. The thing is, the side story, you might have heard this story before, but you had one chance in your first year to send a piece of your best C to Kernighan, one of the authors of Kernighan and Ritchie, the C language. And then the badge of honor was they would shred you and send you back an email. You obviously did not understand the compiler. That's the beginning of every email.
Wow.
Comments are a waste of time. That's usually line number 2 of the email. Get my point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing, though, to think about how close, right, that you get to, like, right there at the birth of so many things. The fact that, like, the C is still taught as so many CS 100 classes. And it's still, my son was taking CS. His first class was C. And I got to be honest, I enjoyed doing his homework, too, right? It was nice to get back.
Me too. I get it.
It was a lot of fun.
I have a brother that's an electrical engineer, and I'm not a big Python programmer just for fun, but in school at work too. And he just tells me, like, that's not a language. You got 4 levels of indirection, and the power output required to, program in Python is like egregious. But it's so much easier today than it used to be.
Right. Well, and I don't want to go down. I want to go down that rabbit hole. But
yeah,
I'm
okay.
Stop
we'll
myself.
Do that later. We'll do it offline.
We'll do that. There'll be a beer somewhere involved. So, so talking about that tension, can you give us like a specific, right? Like an example of when, leaning into that tension, right? That creating the healthy tension that motivates and excites, right? Yeah. Where it's like, hey, we watch movies and TV shows that have tension all the time and it gets our blood going, right? Like, there's so much that goes in there. So if there's a time that's specifically where you leaned into that tension to produce a better outcome rather than trying to smooth it over.
Yeah. We had this happens a lot, I think, between, it depends on the organizational structure. I've had structures where I owned product management and ones where I don't. I don't today. Where I had like all in, and sometimes I just have a piece of, the ecosystem to develop something new or meaningful. There's a company that I recently worked at. I won't tell the name of it, but the sales organization had growth incentives. That was the primary incentive. It wasn't really a farming incentive, and the company was owned by private equity, and so they had EBITDA incentives more than anything else. And so growth and EBITDA growth. And that means that every dollar invested is going to be challenged. And so how do we actually maintain the farm, the products that we have already built, while we're helping our sales organization grow? And they had gotten into a mode of just committing whatever to the customer.
Yeah.
Knock, knock. My name is Joe Sales. I'm here to solve your problem. What's your problem? We have a solution for that before we even know what it is. And then that comes into my queue, and it's like, I got all this farming work, all this maintenance work, all this legacy enhancements, and all this stuff that I've already committed to. I've got a capital plan, and yet I understand that my bonus is going to get paid on EBITDA growth too. I'm an executive in the same pool. So how do I do that? And we had an organizational trust issue because historically that would happen and no investment would come. And then people wouldn't get their bonuses and they get yelled at. So that was sort of the culture that we came at when I joined. And what we did instead is we said, okay, look, I'll tell you what, I will find a way to solve the problem that you want to solve for the customer if it makes business sense. And that goes to the CFO and all those normal things. And I will cost it for you and I will give you the trade-offs. And then we will commit, right, to new product development on behalf of deals. But if we go through this rubric, we know what we're signing up to, roughly. We never really know, do we? We know the economics are going to be positive for the business, roughly. We always generally don't always know that either.
There's some faith.
And then I'm going to stand with you. Yeah, there's some faith there. And then with the sales leader, I'm going to stand beside you and go commit that. And man, I got to tell you, that changed the culture 100% from like engineering receiving these things that sales sold that no one ever knew about, to sales knowing that if they brought us in, we would find a way economically and get approval together to get the resources to go do it, or to make trade-offs to not do other stuff. I'm not wed to any given outcome on my roadmap really ever, other than quality, safety, reliability, that sort of stuff. The ilities, I like to say, those are there. But beyond that, right? Beyond that, you can have this feature or that feature. That's okay. You tell me, And so that changed everything for us and turned us into a really, and by the way, the engineering organization I was leading was super happy to solve these problems because we knew that it was going to drive EBITDA growth, and we knew that the sales organization was going to stand with us, not kind of put us on the edge of a blade, if you will, to deliver or fail. And as engineers, I think I've got a couple on the line here. Do we like to build stuff that doesn't get used? No. Do we like to fail? No. Do we like to get paid our bonus? Yes. That's a human nature thing. So that really changed things. That really changed things for us. And even today, like I look at features that come in and rather than wanting the nth degree of definition, I want to get into the conversation of what are we trying to solve? How can we do it? What will it take to do it? And being transparent. And, that's my best effort to do exactly what it says, manage the tension between organizations. When sales and product are usually can be pretty tense in a software company.
Totally. It's even more surprising, the tension between sales and marketing.
Oh, yeah,
right?
For sure.
I always thought the enemy of my enemy is their friends, but, I thought they were all my enemy. And then I realized they don't like each other either. It's kind of like when I found out that Apple didn't like Google. I'm like, wait, what?
Well, how could that be?
Right? Like, I thought I'm a Microsoft guy. So I'm like, you guys, I got to tell you, like, when you said the ilities, I wanted to work in a joke around like the new record from the Beastie Boys, Licensed to Ilities. Right. I'm like, I got to work this joke in somehow. I'm like, I don't see an entry. I'm going. Okay. But I do think, you did touch on another subject that I think is really important when we get into like developing our teams. You mentioned, do software engineers like to build things that people don't like to use or won't use, right? Yeah. And my answer would be the good ones, right? The good ones don't. The bad ones don't care, right? Like,
isn't that the case?
And if you really wanted to like filter, like when I talk to people about recruiting engineers, find engineers who want to build products that people like using. Yeah. Not people who want to do cool tech because they suck.
Yeah, true. And it's the pride. It's sort of, pride, it's about pride in the work that you've done, right?
Value.
When you ask the question, like, are you proud of that? If the answer is no, warning, if the answer is, yeah, and I think I could make it better. And here's how, and here's my things I'd like to do. And they fight for those things into the prioritization. And I think we've got ownership, joint ownership. When you go onto the floor in our building, and in my floor specifically, I swear to you, I didn't write it on the wall, but I noticed it day one. It says, "Own it."
Mm.
Man, that just speaks to me.
Yeah.
Like we got to own it. It's my product.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to stay up until midnight and make sure it works. 911 gave me a lot of experience on that. Like those, and I still feel superstitious. I knock on wood so many times. I'm like the most superstitious engineer you can imagine. But
I'll give you a run on that one.
We dodged the bullet so many times on really critical outages that would have been extremely consequential. And unfortunately, sometimes those things do bite you. And the feeling of ownership around something that's so life-threatening and life consequential is like wearing a heavy coat after a while. You don't even realize you're wearing it, but then you realize later you take it off. Oh man, I'm always thinking about what's going to happen next and what incident could occur. And that's really, I think, points to me. That's really why I'm really interested in teaching this class around disaster preparedness. I mean, I want people to be prepared for the worst because it's coming.
Yeah. Yeah. So just out of curiosity, do you have a ritual or a habit that you use to lead through complexity?
Yeah, like when you get triggered, right? Because these aren't like daily things. You don't put on the calendar like tension this week, let's go, right? Like Tuesday, it's going to be Taco Tuesday. Wednesday is going to be Tension Wednesday.
Tension
right?
day.
Tension Thursday. We'll go with Tension Thursday at 3:30. We're going to have tension.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think that the Socratic method can go a long way.
Very nice. That came up again. That came up last night too, man. It
Yeah,
was just strumming it.
Ask more questions. Don't ask questions with the intent to answer them before you've heard the question. You guys know this, right? Truly want and seek to understand, and truly be willing to be vulnerable enough to say, I don't understand, and that's okay.
I would say intentionally don't understand, right?
I
The
don't
dummy
know.
card is a really powerful thing of like, explain that to me, right?
Yeah, help me understand that.
Totally.
And then I think the first principle for me to answer your question, and I've been through a lot of digital transformations, is this might sound corny, maybe my Bell Labs days. I want a picture. I'm going to draw a picture with you, or I'm going to draw a picture for you of what this system is like, or what it does, who it serves, how it works, how the gears in your watch click. I want to know that, and we need to know that, because I got to tell you, my experiences, people, when they use the word I think it works like this. I go to the repo and read all the code because I want to know. Yeah. And I want you to know. And then I want a picture that is abstract enough that we can actually talk about it.
Awesome.
You can't see on this thing, but I'm a big Mondrian fan. I love Mondrian. Mondrian's an artist from the 1940s, and there's a painting on my wall behind me here.
Is that it?
Okay. That's it. It's abstractionism. In that painting, it's called Victory Boogie Woogie. It was painted at the end of World War II to basically paint jazz. Like how do you paint a sound? Through abstraction. And I think architecture is an ultimate act of abstraction. It's like, how do we take the problem and then draw a picture about it that ultimately allows us to be framed together to then go write thousands of lines of code and test them and deliver them to someone. So I always go to the picture. I always go to the abstract, and I always go to the whiteboard. And I would say that one way for sure to know that tension's got out of whack in your shop is if the meeting rooms are empty and the whiteboards are clean. If that's the case, no one's talking to each other.
Yeah. Oh man, I love it. The I think is definitely a trigger for me of like, we need to move that to I know. How do we get to I know, right?
I know. Yeah.
And the worst one than that is I think is okay. I hope is the worst.
I hope is not a plan. Absolutely.
Right? Totally. And I had that kind of like, again, we're part of a new business, and I was having a conversation, and I said, so, what is this? And I'm like, well, we're hoping. I'm like, oh boy. Do I create tension here?
Yeah, you should.
Moment?
You
right?
should say,
But I do think like the tension, and not to get too sidetracked, but I do think like some of the reasons, like these additions, right? The acquisitions or divestitures, it's the relationships that are missing, right? You've kind of grooved some things together of like, hey, I understand, appreciate that tension. Now I've injected this other thing that doesn't have respect for the tensions because they don't know the relationships and And to your point of
true.
like, it's the interaction on a whiteboard and the understanding the other player's strengths, and the relationships are kind of critical. And they're just, when you do that, there's like that defensiveness of like, hey,
Totally.
they don't get us. And anyway, so
And that's that Monday morning quarterback thing, isn't it, too? It's like you bought this business and the business is smaller and it had these objectives and it had these limitations on investment, had the people that they had their own things. And then the executives, they made a lot of money and they got out of the business and they sold their business. And now you're left with like the second level of the organization who lived through that map of objectives, intentions, and investments and all that stuff. And then the new boss comes in and they may be less humble than, maybe we want them to be, right? And they say, why did you do this? Oh my gosh, how could you have made that decision? Yeah. And then as an employee that's now in the company that's just been acquired, you're like, but you don't understand. Joe told me to do this. Right. Patrick was a tough guy. He liked friction. He told me to go build this thing and didn't care about how long it took. Make it happen. And then that makes you defensive. So I like the how might we as an opening question in those environments. Like, how might we create this thing, whatever it is, value with what we have and what would we need to do to make it better? Versus, why did you? That's going to create a little friction.
Totally.
How could you? Way worse.
As a dad, how many times have I deployed that with no effect? Right? Whatever. Right? What were you thinking?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And sometimes I ask that to myself. What was I thinking?
Totally.
That might be
and
later.
That's okay.
That's okay.
That's a full-fledged adult who does that, right? But Adan, thank you so much for being on the show. Before we wrap up, I want to know, where can people find your books? How do they connect with your work? How do they connect with you?
Yeah, our books are on Amazon. They're also on Lulu, recently added to lulu.com. That's another self-publishing place. And they're on barnesandnoble.com. And we also have a website, taraxalabsllc.com, where we blog and we try to promote our work there. And there's a link to a lot of other things we've done. We did a TEDx speech for IIT last year. That's on there. There's a number of other speaking opportunities we've done. And again, you don't make money writing nonfiction books. Let me put that out there, first of all. You just don't. If you break even, you're doing well. And so the reason why we do it is we have something to say. And we just want to say it. And we want to spread that knowledge best we can. So any interaction is actually the best part. The reviews I get on books way are better than any money that I would make on the book. And so please, engage there, engage in our blog. I'm also on LinkedIn, so just try to be there in the internet ethernet. So
awesome.
Thank you all so much. It was great to meet you as well. And I hope to be connected with Patrick and Shelli going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we also want to thank our listeners. We appreciate everyone joining us today.
And if you'd like to receive new episodes as they're published, you can subscribe by visiting our website at dragonspears.com/podcast, or find us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode was sponsored by Dragon Spears and produced by Dante32.